Well, welcome to the Old Classic Car channel and a video with a bit of a difference today. In this one I'm going to be talking a little bit about classic car restoration. Have you got to the stage where your car does need some restoration work? And if you're going to go down the route of employing a restoration company to work on your pride and joy, what are some of the things to bear in mind? What are things to think about before committing and signing on the dotted line? Now, I do have a little bit of first-hand experience in this. If you've been following the channel for, or indeed the website, for some time, you may well remember back in the dim and distant past, I had the big green truck just over there restored. This was 15, 16, 17 years ago, I think it was now. I think it started in 2007, so just pre-Youthful Assistant, and it carried on for, I think, until about 2011, so it's quite a prolonged restoration, but it was a huge job. And over the course of that 3-4 year period, I learnt an awful lot about how to work with a professional business restoration company and how to make it work out for the best end result. And yeah, it was certainly a very memorable process, something I won't forget in a hurry. And I thought this would be the perfect subject for a video here on the Old Classic Car channel, because I know lots and lots of people may not have the skills to do a restoration at home, or certainly not a full-blown restoration, might be thinking about employing a company to do the work. But what are some of the things you need to think about if going down that particular route? And I'm also hoping that by creating this video, as well as hopefully including some useful information for people watching out there, people who have their own ideas and their own thoughts on the subject, please pop a note into the comments, because I always find that I often watch how-to videos here on YouTube, and the combination of watching a video and also all reading the comments below, by the time you've done all that, you have a pretty sound understanding. The first thing you probably want to think about is just how far in do you want to go with this restoration? Is the car up and running, usable, but just looking a little bit tired, or maybe the engine's not quite as quiet as it used to be, perhaps the interior lets it down a little bit? So the first thing you really need to think about is how far in, how deep do you want to go with this restoration? And there are several different levels you could go for, and budget will play a big part in that, of course, because restoring a classic car or a vintage car, paying someone to do it, is a sure way of emptying your wallet in pretty rapid order. So it pays to really put the prep in, really think about exactly what you want to achieve with this restoration before signing on the dotted line and committing to having your car restored. Now, it might be that you just want it refreshing, maybe a suspension overhaul, new exhaust, sort the brakes out, maybe something like that. Like I say, perhaps a bit of interior work, new headlining. They can obviously start looking pretty shabby after 50, 60, 70 years, or however old the car is. Paintwork, well, you might want to have a little bit of paintwork done. Are you going to go full respray, or just localised repair work here and there? Again, that is something to think about before you even approach a restoration company. The more planning, the more thought you can put into this, the better the eventual outcome will be. Now, obviously there is a big difference between a bit of a recommissioning and that down that end of the scale, and of course a full nut and bolt concours. Most people will probably go somewhere in the middle area, but again, it really depends on what you want to achieve at the end of all this, and indeed what condition the car is in before you start the work. It's the mindset for a nut and bolt restoration, concours restoration, is very different to a bit of recommissioning work to keep the car going for a few more years. The mindset is a very different thing, depending on whether you just want the car to be reliable, or whether you want to sort of take it out for, Sunday best, if you like, for concours competitions, winning cups, all that kind of thing. And when you get into the world of concours and nut and bolt restorations, that can be a bit of a minefield, to be honest. So again, you need to have a bit of a think. What do you want to achieve with this process? And the clearer you are at the beginning, the better the outcome at the end will be. And of course, the cost comes into it a lot. If you're paying, I don't know what the workshop hours are nowadays, £50 an hour, £100 an hour, £200 an hour in the case of some exotic car specialists, then you really need to think about this. Can you afford it? What happens if you get partway through the restoration and you run out of money? And yeah, that is definitely a possibility, because the thing with classic car restoration is you can go in at the beginning thinking we're going to do A, B, C, D, F, G, H, these jobs, but inevitably when you're restoring a car you are going to find things you weren't aware of early on. You know, when you start stripping paint off a car, when you start taking outer panels off, revealing the inner panels, the structure, that kind of thing, the floor pans, box sections under the floors, when you start digging, inevitably there will be work that you hadn't planned on doing that needs doing. And again, it comes back to budget. If you run into one of these sort of issues, have you got the budget to sort of do this extra work and then get back on track with what you were planning to do? The other thing to think about, of course, is deadline as well. Have you got a set amount of time to see this work done, and can the workshop fit in the work within the deadline you have in mind? It may be that you're not too worried about when the car is actually completed, and you can afford to let the restorer do the work in between other paying jobs when they're maybe a bit quiet. Perhaps over the winter they might be a bit more quiet than in the summer, or vice versa. It really depends on the particular situation of the restorer that you end up going with. But yeah, timescales, that's something to sort of be very sure about early on. Maybe you've got a fixed deadline. You want the car to be done by its 50th birthday or its 70th birthday. Maybe there's an anniversary coming up for that particular car. So say if you have like a Mark I Mini, one of the very first cars from 1959, and you want to get it out to a particular anniversary, say 70 years from when the car was first built or that model was first launched, is that going to be your target? Is it achievable? This is something, again, to discuss with the restorer that you are thinking of using. So yeah, deadlines, because otherwise it's very easy for a project just to sort of dribble along, ramble on for years and years. And the risk of that is that the car gets pushed to the back of the queue in the workshop, and literally gets pushed in the corner and kind of forgotten about. And even worse, it gets pushed outside and gets forgotten about. And that is not a situation you really want at all, especially when a car is in a million pieces and there are parts scattered all over the place. You don't want that to be the case for any longer than it has to be. So yeah, deadline as well as budget. Those are two very important things to think about. Can you afford to do this? Because if you get partway through, you run out of money. Same with a house, really. House restoration, we see plenty of programs on the TV about that. If you run out of money midway through, what are you going to do? Can you raise the extra funds? Can you afford to go cap in hand to the bank and get a loan and meet the repayments? The other point worth raising with restoration is, of course, it's often cheaper, if you can, just to buy a car that's already been done. So long as you can prove that it's been done properly, it's a way cheaper way of getting into an immaculate version of pretty much any car that you can think of. But of course that doesn't take into account the fact that this may have been your first car, like the A40 here. This was my first car, and if I was going to get a restoration company to do the work on that, yeah, it would cost multiples of what the end result would actually be worth. And if I just wanted to have an A40 on the road, it'd be way easier just to go and buy one that's already done. But of course that doesn't take into account the fact that I have nostalgia for this particular car. Of course, another consideration is, what are you going to put the end result, the finished car, to? And that will determine very much how you approach the restoration from day one. Are you just going to use it for a Sunday best? Go out on a nice Sunday afternoon for a drive to the pub, or maybe one of these morning car meets like the meetings that we get to and do videos about here on our channels. Or do you want to daily it? Perhaps you're thinking, I'm going to buy a Morris Minor, it's tax exempt, MOT exempt, fairly cheap insurance by and large, economical little car, simple to work on, and I'm going to run that as my daily. And if you're thinking about doing that, then that's going to be, you're going to have different thoughts in terms of, do you keep it strictly original? Do you upgrade certain parts to make it a bit more usable for a daily driver? Maybe inertia reel seatbelts, more comfortable seats. Some people like fitting electronic ignition, although personally that's not for me. But yeah, there are a number of upgrades you can do which might suit a daily driver, but wouldn't suit a concours car. If you're going to go for a concours car, everything needs to be absolutely A1, the right parts, no fitting a modern stereo into it or modern lamps, LED headlamps, which is not something I like at all. They would look terrible on a classic car if you're going to try and win an award for the best original concours car. If you're going down the modified car route, well, fill your boots up. But if you're going for a concours competition car and you want to win awards as the best restored example of any particular make or model of car, you want to do it right. Many parts under the bonnet, such as like on the A40 here, or Jaguars and things, even some items are dated. I'm thinking of like the windscreen wiper motor, the voltage regulator, dynamo. A lot of these items have date stamps on them, and you want the right date stamps for the age of your car. So that's something to think about, because the time involved in finding the suitable parts, the right parts to suit your particular car based on its build date and registration date, can take a considerable amount of time. There's loads of repro parts around, some good, some not so good for most cars. But if you're going down the concours route, you're doing a nut and bolt restoration, everything has to be A1, and that can be very, very difficult to achieve. Just think of interior trim. Ironically, some of the older cars are actually quite well served when it comes to new seat covers, correct carpets, that kind of thing. But if you're doing a car, say, of the 1970s, 1980s perhaps, you might really struggle to find some usable interior trim, especially, again, if you're going down the show routes, the concours winning route. So that's something very much to think about. What is the end game? What is the end desire for this particular car? Daily driver, Sunday best, or a daily, but like I say, even historic rallying. Lots of people do historic rallying with classic cars now, and the mindsets, the approach to build a historic rally car is going to be very different to that of a concours example. Interior trim doesn't really matter because you throw most of it away, fit a cage or new instrumentation, timing clocks, that kind of thing, bucket seats, and originality is kind of less of a consideration in terms of the actual detail of preparing a car for historic rallying compared to the concours circuit. And again, daily driving is different again. Lots and lots to think about before you even start phoning up restoration companies in your area. Okay, so you've decided that you are going to entrust your pride and joy to a classic car restorer. But how do you pick which one? If you go on Google, search for classic car restoration in your area, you'll inevitably find a number of companies which profess to being able to restore classic and vintage cars to your precise need. But are they always the best choice? How do you go about choosing which company is the best company for you to deal with? Because at the end of the day, this is a business deal. It may be your hobby. For most of us, the old cars are indeed hobbies, but you will be employing a company, and this is their business. And for this to really work out properly, you need to approach this as a business deal, just as you would getting a builder in to do some work on your house, or a gardener to do groundworks outside your house, perhaps. Not that I've ever done that. When you go down the car restoration route, you really have to approach this in a professional way. And one of the things I'd suggest doing is just ask around. If there's like a local classic car meet, go and pop down there, have a word with people down there, see who can recommend companies. I mean, there's a lot to be said for word of mouth recommendations. And also, of course, now the internet is such a big thing. Maybe 20 years ago this didn't apply, but now go online, see what reviews you can find. Go to Google or your favorite search engine, other search engines are available, and just put in quotes the company name, bang, go search, see what you can find. Just a few minutes spent searching online can bring up all sorts of information about a company, how reliable it is, how good their work is, because at the end of the day, you want a good result from all this, especially if you're pouring hard-earned into the restoration of your chosen pride and joy. and just get out there, speak to people at shows, see what experiences there are out there. Most people are really happy to talk about their cars, and indeed if they've had problems with a particular car restoration company, people are more happy than ever to talk about it and tell other people all about it, all the gory details. And with that you can really build up a picture of which companies are worth approaching and others that perhaps are best just left to the side perhaps. And like I say, I can sort of talk about this with a little bit of experience, having gone through a significant restoration with that old truck over there some years ago now. That was quite an experience, let's put it that way. And yeah, that certainly helped concrete in my mind some of the things that really have to think about if you're going down this route of employing a restoration company to work on your car. Okay, so you are busy tapping away on your computer. Have a look at the website. Any reputable restoration company, of course, will have a website, probably have social media presence, whether on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all these kind of places, and just have a really good look. Now, I always think that looking at a company's website will give you a pretty good steer on how well established they are, if it's a bit of a fly-by-night operation. But if they've got a really nice professional website with all the address details and all the contact details listed on there, that should give you a bit of confidence that the company is in it for the long term. Have a look at the About Me page. There's typically a page there talking about some of the main employees that work there. Is their background good? Have they been in the old car world for a long period of time? Another thing I always like to look for is just check the email address. If it's like joeblogs@gmail.com, a throwaway free email address, does that give you confidence again that this is a company in it for the long haul? Whereas if it's joeblogs@joesrestorationspecialists.co. whatever, again, it's only a little thing, but lots of little things add up. And I just think if you've got a proper email address with your company name in it, it just kind of suggests that A, you're organised, B, you're in it for the long term. And I think that is a good thing, because restorations can drag on for years, and you don't want to start out with a restoration company taking your car apart only for them to disappear into the night and leave behind a workshop with a car scattered in many, many pieces across the floor. That's really the thing that you want to avoid, and the more prep you can do, the better. The more research you can do, the better. So I always like to see a real good looking website, proper email address as well, and all the contact details listed there for everyone to see. I think that just gives you a little nugget of confidence that the people you might be dealing with are the right sort. Now, one thing which you very rarely hear spoken about, especially when it comes to restoration companies, is how much of the work is done in-house, i.e. how much of the work will the company that you employ, how much will they actually do? The more work that is done in-house, i.e. by the company that you are dealing with, the better on so many counts really. Do they do the bodywork? Do they do the painting? Have they got their own paint shop? Do they rebuild the engines themselves? Have they got all the machining facilities to do that? Or do they have to farm it out to a third party that you might not even know about? Because you can do all the research you want on the restoration company itself, but you don't know who they'll be farming out this work to, that work to, this work to, and that work to. Now, it's very unusual for a restoration company to be able to do all the work in-house. I'm thinking engine machining and things like chroming. I mean, there aren't that many companies that do re-chroming here in the UK, and that is something that you would expect a restoration company to farm out. They will have relationships with specialist outside companies to do that kind of work, possibly trim work as well, because that's a very specialist area. So you're going to have to expect that some of the work, and therefore some of the parts from your car, will be going out to third parties, and you've got to decide if you're happy about that and how much information you want to know about these other companies. Because it's all very well the restoration company that you've employed being above board and proper and well established and with a great reputation, but you don't know necessarily where these who these sub companies are, and there's always going to be an element of that, like I say, rechroming, for example, or perhaps trim. But the more work that is done in-house, the happier I would be. Now, I know when the big truck was being restored, it was a bit of a mixed bag. They did some of the work themselves, but some of it was farmed out. Plus, they did have quite a turnover of staff as well. And one thing you do like to see is continuity of staff. People who've worked there for years and they want to stay there because they're going to be more invested in the end outcome, that their customer is happy. Whereas if you've got people who are brought in on temporary contracts or just brought in piecemeal work as and when, it can go well, it can work well, there's nothing to say that can't work. But when you've got loyal, happy staff that are staying with the company in the long term, that's always preferable, I think, in my opinion. Again, let me know in the comments. Like I say, the idea of putting this video together was to put my thoughts down onto record with a video, and also to encourage comments and discussion within the comment section of this particular video. So let me know what you think. Am I right? Am I worrying too much about things? Have I forgotten something? So yeah, comments always really appreciated. And if this video is being of any use, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel if indeed you'd like to see more videos like this. I'm always welcome your feedback. Now, you'll be thinking, okay, I found a really good reputable company. They look like proper types. They look like the right crowd to work on my car. So really what you need to do then is try and get an estimate from them of just how much the work you need doing is going to cost. By this point you will have decided how extensive a restoration you will want and what you want the end result to be based on how you plan to use the car at the end. But you really need to get an estimate just so you can work out in your own head, is it affordable? How much more is it going to cost me to restore this car than just go and buy one that's already up and running? And that's not always a consideration, but it's something certainly to bear in mind. So you will want an estimate from this company, bearing in mind what you want to get out of it. You want an estimate of how much is this going to cost? How much money am I going to have to put into this car to see it over the line? Now, I have known examples of companies saying, we estimate it's going to cost this much. And, like I said a little bit earlier in this video, it's very difficult to pin a number on a restoration before you start, because when you start taking things apart, or you take an engine apart and you spot some colossal damage in the engine that may have been the reason why the car came off the road years before you bought it, possibly. So it's very difficult to predict. But, the estimate should be kind of in sight of what the eventual cost will be. In the worst case scenario, it may cost twice probably 3 times what the estimate is, but any more than that, and you do need to start questioning what's going on. If it gets to 6 or 7 times the estimate, then you really do need to have a conversation. And I have known of that happening with restorations in the past. But I don't think we'll need to go into too much detail about that. But just to say, if you can get an estimate pinned down in writing, now this is something that I will refer back to again later in this video, because I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to get everything that relates to this restoration, get it in writing, whether it's written on a piece of paper and signed on headed paper, or an email from the company's email address. You don't know when, months or maybe years down the line, you're going to need to refer back to that and possibly rely on it. I've known restorations happen where a budget has been agreed, it's overrun a little bit, and once it's overrun a lot, then a conversation has happened whereby a fixed rate to see the restoration completed has been agreed. So after the hourly charges, a fixed cost has been agreed to see the job over the line. And that might be accurate, it may not be, but one that has been paid That's it. Now, I have known it happen whereby a customer has paid all the way through regularly, promptly on time, etc., and agreed with the company a final cost to get the vehicle finished and sorted to everyone's satisfaction. And I have known that sometimes that estimate, the final cost estimate, isn't maybe quite as accurate as it could be, and there's been extra work done outside of that. And I have known occasionally that sometimes the customer is presented with a huge bill by the restoration company, even though it was never agreed. So this is when it is super important to have everything in writing so that you can refer back to it and say, no, we agreed this. This is a business transaction. That is the important thing to remember all the way through. Get everything in writing so that everyone knows what is expected of the other party. And indeed, you've got your responsibilities as well as the customer. You have a responsibility to play fair with the restoration company. Pay your bills on time. Keep them on side. Be polite. Be courteous, but be firm. This is not a friend thing. Even if you know the person who's doing the work on your car, it kind of puts you a bit of a disadvantage because you feel awkward about raising issues. But if you don't know them, if you have no prior friendship or knowledge of these people before you start having work done on your car, it makes it a lot easier to be firm, be courteous, be polite, but get everything in writing, because you never know when you're going to need that information, that pre-agreed information to refer back to. And I can say this with some experience. Get it all in writing. This is a business for them, and you should treat it as a business for you. This is a business transaction, and keep everything in writing. I can't overemphasize that enough. Maybe it sounds a bit dramatic, but you never know when you might need to refer to that again. And if you agree something with a company, get them to put it in writing. An email, doesn't matter what, but you need to be able to prove that this was agreed on this particular date. And you can, if there are problems further down the line, you can refer back to that, and you can say, well, this is what you agreed, show me what you're claiming. Sometimes a company will claim this, that and the other, and you think, we never agreed that. Put it in writing, show me in writing where we agreed that. And they can't, because you are organised, you are keeping record of everything that you have agreed. And I can't emphasise just how important this is, and trust me, I know. Now, of course, by this point in time, you'll have probably visited the company on at least one or two occasions. The estimate that I was talking about just a moment ago, make sure they actually see the car. Don't just rely on a few photographs and them saying, oh yes, we can just look at a few photos and we'll give you an estimate. That ain't going to work, because a car in a photograph looks very different in real life compared to what it looks like in a little photograph on a phone or a computer screen or whatever. Now, I certainly recommend visiting at least twice. I would suggest the first time you visit a restoration company is to arrange it, set a time and turn up. Be on time, don't be late, be professional, and just have a look around, just see, try and sort of get a feel for the vibe of what's going on. Is the workshop nice and tidy, or are there tools scattered everywhere? Does everyone look like they've got a job, they know what they're doing, or are they just sort of people just lying around propping cars up, drinking tea? Which is, you can't be too strict, but you do want to see a professionally run outfit. And I would also suggest making an impromptu visit with no advance notice, because 9 times out of 10 garages are open probably 9 to 5 or 9 to 4:30 or whatever, and just pop in unannounced and just see how the place looks. What is the vibe? Are there cars scattered around in the yard outside, all in pieces with tools scattered across the floor? Does it look disorganised? Parts everywhere? Because sometimes if you have a pre-arranged meeting, then people will be on their best behaviour and everything will be neat, organised and tidy. But I would highly recommend going unannounced and just have a look, see if there's any difference between the two visits, because that'll give you a good idea as well of whether the company is the kind of company you want to be entrusting your prized motor car to. Obviously, as part of the discussions that you'll be having with this restoration company, you will have discussed the hourly rate, the rate at which they charge out the work. Do they even charge on an hourly rate, or will they do a job on a fixed cost basis? Now, a lot of restorers don't like fixed cost restoration work because it doesn't leave them much wiggle room in case they uncover problems which weren't previously known about. But for smaller jobs, say if you've got like an MGB and you want, I don't know, an unleaded cylinder head fitting on it, so you know the cost of the unleaded cylinder head or the work to convert your existing head, so there shouldn't be too many unknowns in that. Take the rocker gear off, head off, skimmed, valve seats, whatever, new valves, put it back together, reassemble, do all the tappets, off you go. So it should be fairly easy to do an estimate on that. So you may get a fixed cost estimate on work like that, but more often than not, I think a lot of this work is billed hourly. So be very, very sure of what the hourly rate is, and it doesn't take long. Even if you're paying £50 or £60 an hour, 10 hours. That's a lot of money. That's £500. And bear in mind, if a car is being worked on for, say, 5 hours in the workshop, if there are 2 people working on the car at a time, then that doubles up your hourly rate. So that £50 an hour is for 1 person working on your car. If you've got 2 people working on your car, that suddenly becomes £100 an hour. Yes, it should halve the amount of time because you've got twice the number of people working on your car, but things aren't always that obvious. But if you've got 2 or 3 people working on your car at any one time, that really does start to chew through the money. So be very, very mindful of that and keep a very, very close eye on invoices as they get raised. And talking of invoices, make sure they specify exactly what work has been done, the work that has gone in to create that figure, that labour charge that they are now billing you for. You want a precise breakdown. You don't just want it to say strip down Reliance Scimitar engine or whatever. You want a breakdown of what's been done, what's been found, etc. You want as much information. You really want as much information as possible. And again, this is something that you can refer back to a little bit later. You may need to refer to that if there's any dispute further down the line. So the more precise information you have in terms of estimate, and indeed the work done as the project progresses, that is a very good thing to have. So yes, a very detailed invoice is what you want to be receiving, and also agree how frequently those invoices will be raised. Is it going to be done weekly? Is it going to be done monthly? I mean, cash flow is king when it comes to businesses, especially small businesses. So you might find a smaller restoration company will insist on a weekly invoice, whereas larger companies that can absorb ebbs and flows in the old cash flow, they may charge on a monthly basis. But yeah, check it out, find out, establish this right at the beginning rather than part way through, and that helps avoid any unpleasant surprises as the restoration rumbles on. It's also worth having a talk right at the beginning of the process about what actually constitutes the finished job. It may be that some car owners are able to do some work themselves. They may strip the car down themselves and then deliver the body shell to the restoration company to then be worked on to do the welding, maybe the paint, and then once it's got to that stage with the body all sound and repainted, the car, or the body shell rather, gets delivered back to the customer, and that's the job done. So establish early doors what constitutes a completed restoration in terms of what you want them to do for you. Again, the more clarity you have at the beginning, that's just to everyone's benefit, the customer's benefit, i.e. you, and indeed the restoration company, because they like to know what they've got to work with. They like to know the budget that the customer's running with. They like to know that the customer is going to pay their bills on time. This is a two-way street, and restorations can go on for years, and you need to maintain a relationship with them. So yes, you want them to play ball, but you've got to play ball as well, because if you lose that trust and the relationship breaks down, that's not going to end well for anybody. Now, we haven't quite finished yet with your preparation work before actually having your car delivered to the workshop that you've chosen. Now, one issue, again, which doesn't get spoken about a great deal is insurance. Insurance for your car while it is in their custody, in the company's custody. Now, all reputable insurers will have suitable business insurance, etc., etc. But again, you want this in writing, because if anything happens further down the line, if there's a fire in the workshop or theft, or the company goes out of business, you want to make sure that the insurance is all tied down, every I is dotted and every T is crossed, because if you ever need to rely on this further down the line, you want to make sure it's all right, proper and correct. So you need to know who is responsible for insuring your car when it is in their workshop. Most of the time it'll be the restoration company, it'll fall under their insurance, but you just want to check that, get it in writing beforehand. And does it also apply to the parts once they are removed from the car? And indeed, as we've touched on before, some parts, inevitably bumpers, brightwork, seats, will need to go to outside specialists for specialist work to be done before they come back into the workshop that you've been dealing with. What happens to what's the insurance situation for those parts when they get farmed out and taken to third-party specialists? Again, that is something you really want to have in writing. Make sure that it's all covered either by your car policy and or preferably the restoration company's insurance. You really need to be sure. You need to know exactly what's going on with your car and your parts throughout the entire life of the restoration, your contract with this restoration company, because like I say, this is a business dealing and you have to think in a real business mind. Even though it's a hobby, the old cars, messing around with old cars, driving old cars, when you start working with a restoration company, like any business, you've got to think like a business. So we've talked about estimate, we've talked about insurance, and the only other thing really we need to think about before committing our car to the tender embrace of the restoration company is the budget. Do you have a monthly budget? Is there a monthly cost cap that you want them to work to? Because it'd be very easy for a restoration company just to dive straight in and suddenly present you with an invoice for possibly your entire budget after just the first month, and that might not be sustainable in terms of keeping repayments on the invoices, because like I say, you don't want to be that customer that takes months and months to pay for anything. You want to keep this restoration company on side, but they need to know what your monthly budget is. Is there a cost cap? Can they work up to a particular figure every month and then they go and do work on other cars, so that they don't present you with an invoice that's not payable, basically. So again, that's another little conversation to have, just to say, well, I can work up to, I don't know, £1,000 a month or £2,000 a month. But once you get to that figure for any given month, just pause and then restart the following month. That's something else to bear in mind. There's lots and lots of information, I'm aware, in this video, but hopefully this will just sort of open your eyes perhaps to some of the things you need to consider when talking about getting a restoration company on board. And again, it's in everyone's benefit to get all this detailed and on paper before the restoration even starts. So now let's assume that the car is in and restoration work has been started, and I highly recommend keeping a very, very close eye on what's going on with your car in their workshop. And yeah, sometimes it can feel a bit awkward to sort of questioning, asking about your project, but trust me, it's well worth doing, because if there are going to be any problems with the work that they're doing or whatever part of the restoration, it wants to get picked up earlier rather than later. So yeah, keep a very, very close eye on things. Keep a very, very close eye on the invoiced amounts. Make sure everything is detailed in the invoices. Make sure they don't go over any pre-agreed monthly cap in terms of expenditure. And also, I've written down here on my little list of reminders, mission creep, because it's very easy for a restoration company, once they've got the job in their workshop, for them to suddenly start finding other things that need doing. And they may, like I say, if someone's restoring some bodywork on a car, it's like you can almost be guaranteed that you're going to find more work than you initially expected. But if more work is found, I would expect a professional restorer to approach the customer about it and say, hey, we found this, do you want us to get on with this? Is it okay for us to include this, or add it rather to the work that we have pre-agreed before your car came here? What you don't want is a company just to sort of dive in, start doing work here, there and everywhere, possibly even work that you could do yourself, and then suddenly bill you for it, and the first thing you know about it is you get billed for it, and you think, well, I could have done that when the car comes back home. I once had I think it was one of our MX-5s, and so there was a problem with the headlights, I think, when the car went into the garage, and the first I knew about this was when I went to go and pick the car up and they invoiced me for a new set of headlamps, and I thought, we never agreed that. Why didn't you phone me up and tell me beforehand? Because I could have got some headlamps in and a few screws, and I'd have changed the headlamps myself. I don't want work being done without being advised about it first. So that's something that any reputable company, they will tell you in advance before they actually do the work if they find something serious to actually do that wasn't pre-agreed. But it's not unknown for some companies just to sort of dive in, do it all, and then present you with an invoice, and that's the first you know about any extra work that's been uncovered. And so important to keep in touch with the restoration company. Phone them at least once a week, see how the project is going, pop in and see how things are progressing, and especially, like I was talking about before you even committed to getting a particular company on board, pop in unannounced. That is a really, really good idea, in my opinion. And I say I base a lot of what I'm talking about here based on my own personal experiences. It's not unknown, perhaps, for a customer to call in at a restoration shop and find, unannounced, and find that perhaps their vehicle has been rolled outside of the workshop, maybe while something else is being worked upon, and maybe it was raining, and maybe the customer finds their vehicle outside with the engine in, no bodywork on the front of the vehicle, and all the spark plug recesses filling up with water because it's raining, nothing is covered up, and the vehicle had just been left outside. That's just a random example of what could happen. Pop in unannounced, different times of the week, different times of the day, and just keep a very, very close eye on what's going on. If things don't seem to be progressing very well, raise it. Say, what's happening? Where are we up to with my project? Money's here. We've not got up to the monthly cost cap or expenditure cap. So what's actually happening? But if you start to see your car here and bits scattered all over the place, nothing labelled, you want to nip that in the bud. You want to sort of raise that nice and early doors, because the longer that goes on for, the less good the possible outcome can be. Like I say, it is a two-way street, this. This video is about choosing and dealing with, working with a classic car restoration company to see your project done. But you do have to keep up your end of the game as well. You get invoices, pay them on time, don't leave people waiting, because as I said before, cash flow is king, especially with smaller businesses. If you agree to get certain parts in and bring them over. If you agree a meeting at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning, get there, don't be late, don't mess people about, because you need to keep these people on board. There'll be times when you might need them to work extra hours to get, if you're taking or planning on taking your car to a particular show. It might be going to a special event it might be being picked up on a Friday afternoon. Work is a little bit behind, then you need them to sort of put in some extra hours in the week before to get the car ready for it to be taken to this particular event, which is a fixed date. So you might need them to sort of work extra hours, put the extra effort in to get your car ready for your event. So do your thing, keep up your side of the bargain, and if you do that, chances are you'll have a good relationship, a good business relationship with this particular restoration company. But if you mess people about, they're not going to feel very inclined to really go above and beyond the call of duty to help you out either. So it's a very much a two-way street. But all being well, if you play ball and they play ball and everything is written down beforehand, it should all go pretty smoothly, as smoothly as a restoration can go. And they rarely go super smoothly. But the more organised you are and the more organised and professional they are, that should help resolve any issues that pop up during the course of the restoration. If you do make a random inspection and you think, that doesn't look very good at all, make sure you actually raise it nice and early. And if you're not that confident perhaps with cars, maybe you're not actually a technical person when it comes to working on cars, you're not a mechanic or a classic car specialist yourself, you just happen to own a nice old car, and there's plenty of people in that situation who often entrust work out to garages and restoration companies as and when it's needed, then bring in an independent sort of specialist. Lots and lots of car clubs have details of people who, for a fee, will come in and inspect the work that's been done on your car, and that can be money very well spent. If you've got a model expert who may have been around your particular car, your type of car, for years and have decades of experience in working on them and the common problems with them, they will be very, very well placed indeed to advise on whether work is being done correctly. And I highly recommend, if you're not too confident about your own abilities and being able to spot what work is being done properly and what perhaps isn't being done properly, bring someone in who is, because that can save you a fortune further down the line. And really, what you do want to do, and again this is probably something that will actually be discussed fairly early on, is as the work is progressed on your car, get it documented, photographed, written down what's been done, what hasn't been done. Get the company to do that. Yes, it might end up costing you a bit because time is money, and time spent photographing and documenting the work that they have done for you, it's all going to cost money, but that will pay great dividends further down the line, because 10 years after a restoration has been done, often you've forgotten exactly what has actually been done. And if you ever want to sell the car further on down the line, you've got evidence, you've got the history, a file of information, not just all the receipts. Of course you keep all the receipts, ask the company to keep any receipts, provide you with copies of receipts for any parts they buy. And of course you'll be keeping copies of the invoices for the labour charges as the restoration rumbles along. But yeah, get them to document and photograph, or you can do it yourself, but it's really important to keep a log of all the work that's been done during the restoration. I'm thinking of, if you saw the video I did recently at Heskin Hall, I had a chat with the owner of a very nice little Wolseley 1500, nice two-tone car restored a few years ago, and the owner opened the boot up and he showed me this file of all these photographs, and that kind of thing is invaluable, because you can have a car that is super shiny and you put it on sale and you say this car was restored, it's in great condition, blah blah blah, but a shiny coat of paint can hide all sorts of horrors. And anyone who's been around the classic car world for for just a few years will have heard and read stories of cars not being perhaps as good as they looked on the surface. A shiny coat of paint can hide many sins, but if you've got photographs of the restoration process and the panel work underneath that shiny coat of paint, you can prove, you can demonstrate that those door bottoms, they weren't just filled and then they're going to bubble through again before very long. They actually had perhaps new door skins set in, or part door skins at the bottom. The frame was rebuilt with metal, little skimmer filler, that's not a bad thing, but you don't want the doors rust to be just bogged up with filler and no fresh metal. And if you can prove, if you can demonstrate how well and how in depth the work has been done on your car, you can say to people, yes, shiny bodywork, and look, here we go, this is the work that was done. I can show you what is hiding underneath that lovely shiny coat of paint, and that will give people confidence in considering and deciding whether to buy your car or not. So documenting the restoration from beginning all the way through is so important. It's just essential really, because at some point you're going to need to prove what work was done. Same with engine work. If you can show your engine in pieces and the work being done, perhaps the crank being reground, new bearings, pistons, make sure you include the engine number in some of your photographs just to prove that the engine you've got photographs of is the engine for your car. Same with photographs of the car being restored. It all helps, it all adds up. And yeah, if you want to get the correct market price for your car some years after the restoration is completed, have it all documented. Keep detail, keep everything that relates to the restoration. Indeed, any other work that you do, whether you do oil changes, that kind of thing, you're going to be keeping a log of it all anyway. But when you've had a big major restoration, the more you can prove that you've had the work done properly and correctly by people who know what they're doing, that is all to the good when it comes to trying to sell this car a little bit further down the line. I think I've probably spoken and waffled on plenty enough for this particular video, and the idea being just to give you a few ideas, a few things to think about if you're considering employing a classic car restoration company to look after and to work on your car, whether it's a bit of recommissioning, maybe engine work, a bit of a retrim on the interior, or a full nut and bolt restoration to Concours standard. Of course, there'll be other things you'll be thinking, ooh, maybe you should talk about this, or maybe I should have included that. So please pop a note in the comments, and between this video and the comments that hopefully will get left over time, as this video will be here for many years, all being well, between them, that should give people a really good steer on just how to approach having a classic car restored going forward. So thank you so much for watching this video, a bit of a different one for the classic car, the old classic car channel. So I hope it was of interest anyway. Let me know in the comments what cars you have had restored in the past, or if you're thinking about having a car restored, was this video of use? I'd really appreciate the feedback. Please check out the rest of the channel, like, comment, subscribe, all that kind of thing, and there'll be many more videos along very soon. So bye for now.